Welcome to Forgotten History Daily. I'm William, and tonight we journey into one of history's most fascinating and darkest stories. It's a tale that will make you question the very foundations of modern medicine and the lengths people will go to in pursuit of health and wellness. You might be wondering what could possibly have driven individuals to knowingly ingest something that would ultimately kill them. The answer lies in the radium craze, a phenomenon that swept America in the 1920s. Imagine being told by your doctor that drinking radioactive water was the key to eternal youth and vitality. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? Yet, this is precisely what thousands of Americans were convinced of during the height of the radium craze. And at the forefront of this movement was a charismatic figure named Marie Curie's assistant, Marguerite Cassinelli. In 1922, she opened the first radium-infused water treatment center in New York City, touting the liquid as a cure-all for ailments ranging from arthritis to impotence. But it wasn't just New York that fell under the spell of radium. Across America, from Los Angeles to Chicago, cities and towns were erecting their own radium water bottling plants. And it was here, in these sterile white-walled facilities, that the unsuspecting public would drink down radioactive-laced water, trusting in its purported health benefits. As we delve into this tale of hubris and tragedy, you'll discover how corporate interests and profit-driven motives fueled the radium craze. We'll explore the pivotal events, including a notorious lawsuit against Radioactive, the infamous radium-infused water that should have sounded alarms for the medical community, but were instead ignored or downplayed. And we'll reveal just how many Americans ultimately fell victim to this radioactive obsession. The number is staggering. Thousands of women died prematurely due to radium poisoning, their bodies irreparably damaged by a substance deemed harmless at the time. You may be thinking that this is a relic of history's darker past, something with no relevance to our modern world. But we'll also examine how this same hubris and complacency can still occur today, in the boardrooms and laboratories where corporate interests clash with public safety. Join me tonight as we uncover the tragic tale of the radium craze, a story that not only serves as a warning about unchecked ambition, but also raises uncomfortable questions about our own willingness to put faith in science. It's the summer of 1925, and America is in a frenzy of optimism and progress. The Roaring Twenties are in full swing, with jazz clubs and speakeasies popping up on every corner. Flappers dance the Charleston, their beaded fringe dresses shimmering under the dim lights of underground bars. But amidst this carefree atmosphere, something strange and unsettling is brewing. In the heart of New York City, a peculiar phenomenon has taken hold. Radium-infused water, touted as a cure-all for ailments ranging from arthritis to impotence, has become the latest health craze. And at its forefront are companies like Radioactive, whose salesmen hawk their wares with charismatic zeal. Imagine strolling down Fifth Avenue, surrounded by towering skyscrapers and bustling street vendors. You catch sight of a gleaming storefront, its windows plastered with posters proclaiming the miraculous benefits of radium water. The proprietor, a suave-talking entrepreneur, welcomes you in with a charming smile. "Come in, friend. I've got just what you need to cure your ills." As you enter, the air is thick with the scent of fresh water and the soft murmur of conversations. In the background, a jazz band plays a lively tune, while rows of gleaming bottles stand at attention on the shelves. You spot a well-dressed housewife, sipping from a glass filled to the brim with Radioactive's signature radium-infused water. But what exactly is this mysterious liquid? How did it capture the nation's imagination so swiftly? Let's take a step back in time to 1922, when the first radium treatment center was opened by Marguerite Cassinelli. That's right, the same woman who claimed radium could cure impotence went on to inspire a national frenzy. Cassinelli's New York clinic became a magnet for the curious and the desperate. People flocked from all over, eager to drink in the supposedly magical properties of radium-infused water. But behind the scenes, something more sinister was at play. In Chicago, the city's largest radium water bottling plant sprang up overnight, churning out thousands of bottles a day. The company's chief executive, J. Alox, touted his product as the most effective treatment for all modern diseases. And he wasn't alone in this crusade. Across America, entrepreneurs and physicians alike jumped on the radium bandwagon. As we delve deeper into the world of 1920s America, we begin to notice a peculiar phenomenon. The country is gripped by an intense sense of optimism and faith in science. People are willing to try just about anything to cure their ailments, no matter how outlandish or unproven it may seem. For many Americans, radium water represented the cutting edge of modern medicine, a beacon of hope in an uncertain world. It was an era when scientists like Marie Curie had pioneered groundbreaking discoveries in radioactivity. The idea that tiny amounts of this mysterious force could cure everything from cancer to impotence seemed almost plausible. But as we explore the innings of these radium treatment centers, we start to notice something disturbing. Behind the gleaming facades and charming sales pitches lies a web of deceit and recklessness. Salesmen are peddling products that have been barely tested for safety, while entrepreneurs like Alox are more concerned with profits than patient welfare. It's not just the companies that are at fault. The medical community is also culpable in this nationwide tragedy. Physicians and researchers, supposedly guardians of public health, are too often caught up in the fervor, recommending radium treatments to their patients without fully understanding the risks. In 1924, a group of concerned citizens, led by Dr. George Lichtenstein, took Alox's company to court over allegations that Radithor was poisoning customers. But despite mounting evidence of radium toxicity, the case was dismissed with little fanfare. It seemed as though no one wanted to rock the boat. The radium had become too big, too influential. As we navigate this world of 1920s America, it's essential to remember that these were ordinary people, not caricatures from a bygone era. They were just like you and me, with families, jobs, and aspirations. And they were all swept up in the radium craze. You might find yourself thinking about the parallels between this national obsession and our own time. How often do we see the media hyping miracle cures or unproven treatments? Have you ever wondered why some products are touted as natural or organic when their safety has been called into question by reputable scientists? The answer lies in a mix of factors: corporate interests, public desperation for health solutions, and an over-reliance on science. As we explore this tangled web of motives, it becomes clear that the radium craze was not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of deeper issues within American society. And so, as we continue our journey into the heart of this tragedy, remember that history is never far behind us. The mistakes of 1920s America can serve as a cautionary tale for today's health trends and business practices. Let's take a closer look at some of the key figures behind the radium craze, men and women who played a pivotal role in shaping this national phenomenon. You'll meet entrepreneurs like William J. Alox, whose Chicago-based Radithor empire made them a household name. You'll encounter physicians who promoted radium treatments with zeal, despite growing evidence of its dangers. And you'll learn about the courageous few who dared to speak out against this madness. People like Dr. Flug, George Lichtenstein and his team. Their stories will take us on a journey across America, from the gleaming skyscrapers of New York City to the dusty towns of rural Oklahoma. We'll witness firsthand the impact of radium poisoning on thousands of lives, families torn apart by premature deaths, communities shattered by loss. As we near the end of this tale, it's essential to confront a difficult truth. Between 1920 and 1938, an estimated 5,000 women died prematurely due to radium poisoning. their bodies irreparably damaged by a substance deemed harmless at the time, their lives cut short their prime. It's a staggering number, but one that should serve as a stark reminder of our own capacity for hubris and complacency. We live in a world where science is constantly advancing, yet we still fail to learn from history. The radium craze was not an isolated incident. It's a warning sign that our society often ignores. As we bring this chapter to a close, remember the power of storytelling and its capacity to educate us about our own darker tendencies. We've explored the world of 1920s America. People were so caught up in their pursuit of health and wellness that they ignored the warning signs. One of those warning signs was a young woman named Lorraine Slater, who worked at the United States Radium Corporation's factory in Orange, New Jersey. In 1927, she was one of many women employed to paint glow-in-the-dark watch faces with radium-infused paint. The work required them to use their tongues to shape the tiny brushes, as they couldn't hold them otherwise. Unbeknownst to Lorraine and her colleagues, this simple action would ultimately lead to their downfall. At first, the effects were subtle. Some women reported headaches and fatigue, while others experienced painful joints and gums. But as time went on, more severe symptoms began to emerge. Women started to lose their hair, teeth, and nails. Their bones became brittle and fragile, prone to breaking with the slightest impact. And then there was the jaw pain, excruciating, constant, and often debilitating. Despite these telltale signs, doctors were initially baffled by the women's conditions. They were diagnosed with everything from anemia to rheumatism, but nothing seemed quite right. It wasn't until 1928 that a doctor, Harrison Martland, the chief medical examiner of Essex County, New Jersey, began to suspect radium poisoning. Martland was no stranger to radium. In fact, he had once been a consultant for the United States Radium Corporation himself. But as he delved deeper into the case files, he became increasingly convinced that radium was responsible for the women's ailments. His slurians were confirmed when he discovered that many of the patients had ingested or absorbed small amounts of radium while working at the factory. As news of Dr. Martland's findings spread, the medical community began to take notice. But instead of being hailed as a hero, he faced fierce resistance from the radium industry. The United States Radium Corporation and manufacturers continued to tout the health benefits of radium, downplaying or dismissing concerns about its toxicity. One key figure in this battle was Dr. George Lichtenstein, a physician from New York City who had been treating patients afflicted with radium poisoning since 1925. He became a vocal advocate for the victims and their families, tirelessly pushing for greater awareness and regulation of radium products. But despite his efforts, many people, including some of his own colleagues, remained skeptical. I've seen women come in here with mouths full of teeth missing, Dr. Lichtenstein would later recall. Their jaws are disintegrating from the inside out. And I'm saying to them, don't go back to work, don't take any more radium, they're too proud. Or maybe they just don't want to believe me. It's this mixture of pride and denial that ultimately allowed the radium craze. As we'll see in the next chapter, the victims' stories would eventually lead to significant changes in the way radium was regulated and marketed. But before that could happen, thousands more lives were lost to this deadly substance. We're about to enter a new phase of our story. One marked by growing awareness and activism on the part of those affected by radium poisoning. It's a critical moment in American history, one that will test the resolve of the medical community, the government, and society at large. As we delve deeper into this complex tale, remember that the consequences of hubris and complacency can be deadly, and that the legacy of the radium craze still echoes today. The early 20th century, a time of great optimism and progress in America. The country was booming, with new technologies emerging and industries expanding at an unprecedented rate. But amidst this growth and innovation, there existed a darker underbelly, one that would eventually lead to the deaths of thousands. It began in the 1920s, when the United States Radium Corporation started marketing radium-infused products as the latest fad in health remedies. Women were encouraged to ingest tiny amounts of radium-laced water, believing it would grant them eternal youth and beauty. Radioactive face creams, toothpaste, and even radon-rich drinking water became all the rage. But where did this fascination with radium come from? One person whose significant role in popularizing radium was Irene Joliot-Curie, the daughter of Marie Curie herself. In 1930, Irene, along with her husband Frédéric Joliot-Curie, discovered that radium could be used to create a radioactive isotope that emitted intense radiation, one which they dubbed polonium. It seemed as though radium was a panacea, a cure-all for any ailment. The media were quick to jump on board, hailing it as the new fountain of youth. But behind this facade of promise lay a sinister reality. Women working at factories that produced radium-laced products began reporting symptoms so bizarre they defied explanation. Fatigue, headaches, and joint pain were just the beginning. They'd ingest a few drops of infused water to supposedly cure their ailments. But what they didn't realize was that this substance would slowly poison them from within. As these women's conditions worsened, doctors scrambled to find answers. But it wasn't until 1928 when Dr. Frew, for a while other than, but it wasn't until 1928 when Dr. Harrison Martland began suspecting radium poisoning in his patients that the first cracks started to show in the edifice of radium's supposed benefits. And then there was Dr. Sir George Lichten, a New York physician who had been treating patients with radium poisoning since 1925. Lichtenstein would later recall, these women were told they'd be glowing like diamonds after drinking this stuff. They believed it, of course, because it sounded too good to be true. He began warning his patients about the dangers of them, but many were resistant to change. Some even continued working at factories, where their imps actively encouraged them to ingest radium-laced. We'll never know the exact number of women who succumbed to radium poisoning during this period. It's believed that hundreds died from consuming radioactive materials in the early 20th century alone. But as more and more victims came forward with tales of woe, whispers of a cover-up began spreading in the medical community. Some pointed fingers at the United States Radium Corporation and other manufacturers for deliberately downplaying radium's toxicity. Others suspected government agencies of complicity, either through ignorance or outright malfeasance. As these allegations began to snowball, politicians started to take notice. In 1930, President Herbert Hoover established a commission to investigate radium-related health concerns. However, many were skeptical about the commission's findings, which concluded that the general public had not been misled by radium advertisements. Meanwhile, Irene Joliot-Curie continued to sing radium's praises, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Her advocacy for radium-infused products shockwaves through the medical community, dividing doctors and scientists along ideological fault lines. Those who championed radium cited its potential benefits in fighting cancer and other diseases. Yet, as we now know, this push for a quick fix was driven by a mix of hubris and greed, not just by those marketing radium-infused products, but also by some within the medical establishment itself. They saw an opportunity to profit from the latest fad, ignoring or downplaying concerns about toxicity. But there were voices of dissent, courageous individuals who dared challenge this toxic juggernaut. George Lichtenstein and others like him stood firm in their warnings against radium consumption. However, these lone voices were drowned out by the cacophony of advertisements promising eternal youth through radioactive elixirs. In this atmosphere of confusion, where vested interests vied for attention and profits over people's lives, it became increasingly clear that nothing short of a cultural reckoning was needed. What we're witnessing here is not just a series of unfortunate events, but an all-out betrayal, one in which greed and ambition took precedence over human well-being. As the stakes continued to rise, a handful of intrepid individuals would soon emerge as beacons of hope for those suffering from radium poisoning. These heroes of our story were fueled by determination and outrage, a potent cocktail that propelled them toward action. With each new revelation about the dangers of public opinion began shifting. Americans started questioning the companies peddling radioactive products and demanding answers from their leaders. We'll follow this narrative thread as it unfolds in subsequent chapters. But for now, let's pause to reflect on a question fundamental to our understanding of human nature. What drives us towards self-destruction? The seeds of this catastrophe were sown in an era marked by scientific progress, innovation, and unbridled optimism. In the midst of great change and discovery, humanity tends to forget that true advancement requires balance between science and ethics, progress and prudence. We'll delve into these themes as we continue exploring the radium craze. Join us next time on Forgotten History Daily as we confront the darker aspects of human nature, where fear, power, and betrayal come together in a toxic cocktail that still has resonance today. As the radium craze reached its peak, a small group of citizens began to organize against the exploitation. In cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, concerned residents formed coalitions demanding greater regulation and accountability from the companies responsible for peddling radioactive products. One such coalition, led by a determined woman named Alice Hamilton, would go on to become a thorn in the side of radium industry leaders. Hamilton's crusade against radium began after her own sister fell victim to its toxic effects. The personal toll was devastating, but it also galvanized Hamilton into action. She embarked on a series of investigations, uncovering shocking facts about the radium industry's practices. Her findings revealed that companies were knowingly selling products laced with radioactive materials, often at exorbitant prices, and with no regard for consumer safety. As Hamilton's expose gained momentum, she attracted the attention of progressive newspapers and publications. Sensationalized headlines began to appear on front pages across the country. Radium poisoning, the silent killer, the radium scandal, a national shame. Public outrage grew, and with it, pressure on policymakers to enter Thomas Edison, the legendary inventor and entrepreneur, who had long been an advocate for scientific progress. Though initially supportive of radium research, Edison eventually became a vocal critic of its reckless exploitation. He publicly announced the radium industry's practices as nothing short of a racket, stating that the pursuit of profit over people was a grave mistake. Edison's condemnation carried significant weight, and his words helped to shift the national conversation on radium. However, not all powerful figures were so swayed. Of the United States Radium Corporation, one of the leading radium manufacturers, continued to push back against any attempts at regulation or reform. The USRC's owner, Edward Gordon, was a cunning and ruthless businessman who had made his fortune by capitalizing on public ignorance about radium. He maintained that the dangers of radium were exaggerated and that any concerns were mere hysteria, perpetuated by competing interests. Gordon's stance only fueled further out among those affected by radium poisoning, including families of workers at the USRC's factory in Orange, New Jersey. Conditions at this facility were dire. Women toiling in dimly lit rooms with inadequate ventilation, their fingers constantly exposed to radium-laced materials as they painted watch faces with glowing paint. These workers, known as radium girls, suffered gruesome injuries and developed debilitating illnesses due to prolonged exposure to radioactive substances. They died young, often under tragic circumstances. A once vibrant life reduced to a mere whisper of its former self. The stories of these radium girls would eventually become a rallying cry for the growing movement against radium exploitation. As the public's perception began to shift, more voices emerged from within the scientific community, warning about the dangers of unchecked exposure to radioactive materials. These courageous scientists, men and women like Dr. Courses. These courageous scientists, men and women like Dr. Courses, Liechtenstein, Alice Hamilton, and Thomas Edison, played a crucial role in pushing back against the forces driving the radium craze. Together, they helped spark a national conversation on ethics, accountability, and the importance of balancing scientific progress with human well-being. As we approach the climax of this chapter in Forgotten History Daily's exploration of the radium craze, one question lingers. What lessons can we draw from this cautionary tale about humanity's capacity for self-destruction? As the years passed, the radium craze continued to grip America, with more and more people clamoring to get their hands on radioactive infused products. The 1920s were a time of great optimism, but this enthusiasm for all things would ultimately prove disastrous. On a sweltering summer day in August 1925, Mary Ellen Wilson, a 28-year-old factory worker from Orange, New Jersey, stumbled into the local hospital with severe pain and numbness in her jaw. Her fingers were so weakened that she struggled to hold even the lightest objects. The doctor's initial diagnosis was nerve damage, but as they probed deeper, they discovered a more sinister truth. Mary Ellen's exposure to radium had left her radioactive. Her case would become one of many harrowing examples of radium poisoning's devastating effects on human health. As Mary Ellen's story spread throughout the community, it sparked outrage among local residents and factory workers who toiled in similar conditions. The once tolerated industry practices were now seen as grossly negligent, if not downright malevolent. Meanwhile, Alice Hamilton, the pioneering doctor and investigator, continued her tireless crusade against radium exploitation. She published a damning expose in 1925, in the industry's shocking lack of regulation and accountability. Her work was instrumental in pushing policymakers to take action, but it would be a long and arduous battle. Hamilton's article sparked widespread public concern, with newspapers from coast to coast weighing in on the radium scandal. The Chicago Tribune, one of the most prominent publications of its time, ran a front-page expose in October 1925. Radium poisoning epidemic hits nation. The headline was accompanied by a graphic illustration. As public awareness grew, so did the pressure on government officials to intervene. In December 1926, President Calvin Coolidge finally responded with a statement condemning radium poisoning as an avoidable calamity. His words were a welcome respite for advocates like Alice Hamilton, but the industry pushed back hard against any attempts at reform. The United States Radium Corporation continued to downplay the risks associated with radium exposure, arguing that moderate levels of radiation were harmless. Edward Gordon, the cunning owner of USRC, even went so far as to deny allegations that his company was responsible for any radium-related health problems. "It's nothing but a fad," he told reporters in 1927, dismissing concerns of radium poisoning as nothing short of hysteria. His words only served to fuel public outrage and galvanize. Back in Orange, New Jersey, Mary Ellen Wilson fought bravely for justice. Despite her debilitating condition, she continued to advocate for better working conditions and compensation for fellow workers affected by radium poisoning. Her story inspired others to speak out, and soon a groundswell of support emerged from the very factories where women like Mary Ellen had suffered so greatly. In 1928, a group of radium girls took their case to court, seeking justice in a landmark lawsuit against USRC. The trial would prove to be one of the most dramatic and emotionally charged in American history, but it was only just beginning. As the battle for accountability raged on, another tragic tale emerged from the shadows. In 1929, Rachel Sturken, a 25-year-old factory worker, succumbed to radium poisoning. Her death was a stark reminder of the devastating toll this industry took on human life. and sparked outrage among those who had fought tirelessly for reform. In that same year, Alice Hamilton's tireless efforts finally paid off. Congress passed the Federal Radiation Control Act, setting new standards for radium production and limiting its use in consumer products. It was a crucial step forward, but many felt it didn't go far enough, and that the fight against radium exploitation would only be truly won when those responsible were held accountable. The struggle was far from over. Edward Gurdon's USRC continued to deny any wrongdoing, while others in the industry pushed for more lenient regulations. In 1930, the US Supreme Court even weighed in on a landmark case involving one of the Radium girls, and their determination would soon be put to the ultimate test. The following year, Mary Ellen Wilson, now an invalid confined to her bed, passed away, leaving behind a legacy as a champion for workers' rights. Her courageous story served as a rallying cry for those who continued to fight against radium exploitation, but it also highlighted the heartbreaking human cost of this industry's recklessness. In 1932, Alice Hamilton delivered a stern rebuke to Congress. "We must act now. We cannot stand idly by while women like Mary Ellen Wilson suffer and die because of corporate greed." Her words echoed through the halls of power, but there was still much work to be done, and not a moment too soon. As we near the end of this chapter in Forgotten History Daily's exploration of the radium craze, one question lingers. What will it take for humanity to learn from its mistakes and prevent similar tragedies? The answer to that question would come in the form of a new era of activism, fueled by the courageous efforts of those who had come before. In 1934, a young lawyer named Maurice Williams stepped into the fray, taking up the mantle of representing radium girls and their families in court. Williams' tireless advocacy and dogged pursuit of justice would change the course of history. As he delved deeper into the cases of radium poisoning, Williams became increasingly outraged by the blatant disregard for human life displayed by industry leaders. He saw firsthand the devastating effects of radium exposure on his clients: crippling illnesses, gruesome ulcers, and an agonizing decline into disability. The more he learned, the more convinced he was that corporate greed had driven companies to prioritize profits over people. Williams' most high-profile case was that of Catherine Donahue, a former watch face painter who had suffered from severe radium poisoning for years. In 1935, Williams took on the USRC in court, determined to expose the company's negligence and secure justice for his client. The trial would become one of the most dramatic and consequential in American history. As the case unfolded, Williams presented a wealth of evidence demonstrating industry's reckless disregard for worker safety. He revealed that company officials had been aware of the dangers of radium exposure as early as 1917, yet continued to expose their employees to hazardous conditions. The prosecution painted a picture of a callous and cynical industry, driven by a relentless pursuit of profit at any cost. The jury's verdict was unanimous. Catherine Donahue would receive compensation for her suffering, but more importantly, the trial sent a powerful message to the industry. For the first time, corporate leaders began to grasp the true extent of their culpability in the radium tragedy. The tide was finally turning against them. However, not everyone was willing to accept responsibility. In 1936, Edward Gurdon's USRC issued a statement denying any wrongdoing and attributing the suffering of radium girls to pre-existing conditions, but he continued to downplay. As Williams' crusade gained momentum, other voices began to join the chorus. Journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens spoke out against the industry's exploitation, pushing for tougher regulations and greater accountability. It was a testament to the power of collective action and the indomitable human spirit. Even in the face of overwhelming corporate opposition, a community had come together to demand justice. The radium craze may have been a dark chapter in American history, but it would not be the final act. The legacy of Catherine Donahue, Mary Ellen Wilson and countless other Radium girls would continue to inspire new generations of activists and reformers. And as we approach the end of this story, one thing becomes clear. The struggle against corporate greed and exploitation is far from over. But with courage, conviction, and collective action, it can be won. The Radium Craze of the 1920s, a tale of human folly and corporate recklessness that continues to haunt us today. As we've seen, the trailblazing work of lawyers like Maurice Williams brought attention to the plight of Radium girls, but their story was just one thread in a vast tapestry of neglect and exploitation. Behind closed doors, a labyrinth network of industrialists, scientists, and politicians collaborated to conceal the truth about radium's dangers. In 1922, a confidential memo from the US Radium Corporation revealed that company officials had been aware of the Radium girls' poisoning as early as 1917, yet deliberately concealed this information. In a chilling example of corporate duplicity, Dr. Joseph Felsenthal, a USRC physician, warned his superiors about the radium danger in a letter dated August 18, 1921. However, instead of taking action to protect workers, the company instructed Felsenthal to keep quiet about the issue and to write a reassuring report to the girls. This calculated deceit would become a Meanwhile, in Congress, senators like William E. Borer of Idaho began questioning the radium industry's safety record. On April 12, 1923, Borer led an inquiry into the USRC's practices, but his efforts were met with fierce resistance from industry lobbyists and compliant regulatory. The Senate report ultimately concluded that there was no evidence to support charges of gross negligence, a conclusion at odds with mounting evidence. A particularly egregious case came to light in 1928, when Alice Hamilton, a pioneering occupational health expert, conducted an investigation into the USRC's factories. Findings were damning. Workers' radium intake exceeded safe limits by as much as tenfold. Inadequate ventilation systems allowed radioactive particles to escape and contaminate nearby homes. As Hamilton's report gained traction, media outlets began to scrutinize the industry. In 1929, an expose in the New York Times revealed that radium manufacturers had been secretly funding research on worker health, while simultaneously denying any wrongdoing. The piece quoted a USRC spokesperson dismissing concerns as merely theoretical and assuring readers that we are doing all we can to prevent accidents. Yet, beneath the surface of this public relations charade, a stark reality. In 1931, a study by the American Journal of Public Health documented that workers exposed to radium showed marked increases in leukemia, bone cancer, and radiation poisoning. As awareness grew about the industry's culpability, a new breed of whistleblower emerged. Former employees who had witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences of radium exposure. In 1934, one such witness, Emma Roche, a former watch face painter at the USRC's factory in Waterbury, Connecticut, courageously testified before Congress about the company's systematic. "I saw girls as young as 16 painting with their tongues," recounted, her voice trembling with emotion. "They'd lick their brushes to shape the dials, and then they'd go home to their families, unaware of what they were exposing them to." Her testimony would prove pivotal in shifting public opinion against the industry. Fast forward to today. Parallels between the radium crisis and modern controversies abound. Consider the struggles faced by workers exposed to toxic chemicals in the 21st century oil and gas industry, or the thousands affected by radiation leaks at nuclear power plants like Fukushima Daiichi. Each incident serves as a stark reminder of corporate neglect, regulatory failures, and the ongoing imperative for greater accountability. One often overlooked aspect of this story lies in its global reach. Radium was used extensively throughout the world to create luminescent paints for everything from watch faces to glow-in-the-dark signs. By 1925, Companies like the British Radium Company had set up production facilities across Europe and Asia, further expanding the market. In Japan, in particular, a similar radium crisis unfolded with eerie similarities. Factory workers, mostly young women, suffered from severe radium poisoning while painting glow-in-the-dark dials. In 1931, Japanese journalist Takichi Tsukuda published an exposé on the BRC's reckless practices, echoing concerns raised by Alice Hamilton in the US. As we draw closer to the end of this story, one question lingers: what lessons have been learned from the radium craze? Today, as environmental activists and advocates push for greater transparency and safety standards in industries like nuclear energy and chemical manufacturing, it's clear that history is repeating itself. Take the case of the 1960s uranium mine contamination on the Navajo reservation. Decades later, a similar cover-up surrounding radioactive leakages would unfold at the Gold King mine in Colorado, contaminating nearby water sources and highlighting ongoing regulatory issues. In an eerie echo of USRC's response to radium poisoning, some corporate players today downplay or dismiss environmental concerns, citing pre-existing conditions or emphasizing their own benevolence. Meanwhile, workers and communities continue to pay the price for neglect, often in the form of preventable illnesses and lifelong suffering. As we close this chapter on the radium craze, one thing remains certain: history's lessons, though repeatedly unlearned, still hold power to educate, warn, and inspire action against corporate greed. By exploring these forgotten histories, we may yet forge a path towards greater accountability and a safer future for all, one where human life is above profit and the consequences of neglect. As the 1920s wore on, the radium craze showed no signs of slowing down. In fact, it seems to be gaining momentum, with companies like USRC and BRC expanding their operations and increasing production. The lure of radium's magical glow and perceived health benefits had captivated the public imagination, making it increasingly difficult for regulators and scientists to sound the alarm. In New York City, where USRC was based, the company was hiring hundreds of young women to work in its factory, painting watch faces and other products with a special glowing paint. These women, many of whom were recent immigrants from Europe, were told that radium was harmless and even beneficial for their health. They worked long hours, often without proper training or protective equipment, carefully painting tiny brushstrokes onto the watch faces. Meanwhile, the medical community began to sound the alarm about the risks associated with radium exposure. Henry Kessler, a prominent radiation expert at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital, had been studying the effects of radium on the human body and was shocked by what he found. In 1925, he published a paper warning that prolonged exposure to radium could lead to anemia, bone cancer, and even death. Despite these warnings, USRC continued to downplay the risks associated with radium. The company's founder, George Bartholf, claimed that radium was as harmless as sugar, and that his workers were not at risk of suffering any adverse effects. However, behind the scenes, Bartholf was well aware of the dangers posed by radium. In internal memos, he described the substance as a deadly poison that could cause radiation sickness if ingested or inhaled. As the radium craze reached its peak, thousands of women were working with radium every day, unaware of the risks they faced. Many of these women would go on to suffer from severe health problems, including anemia, bone cancer, and infertility. Some would even die young, their bodies ravaged by radiation poisoning. One such woman was Catherine Donahue, a 23-year-old factory worker at USRC's New York City facility. In 1927, Donahue began to experience strange symptoms, fatigue, weakness, and joint pain. Despite her pleas for medical attention, she was dismissed as a hypochondriac by company doctors, who attributed her condition to nerves or hysteria. Donahue's condition would only worsen over the Donahue's story is just one example of the many women who suffered and died as a result of their exposure to radium during the radium craze. Their stories serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of corporate greed and the failure of regulatory oversight. As we continue to explore the dark history of the radium craze, it becomes clear that this was not just an incident involving a few companies or individuals, but a systematic failure that allowed corporate interests today, as we face new environmental challenges and ongoing neglect of workers' rights. The lessons of the radium craze remain as relevant as ever. As we delve deeper into the radium craze, it's essential to understand that the consequences of this fateful event would continue to unfold for decades to come. The women who had been exposed to radium in the factories began to succumb to the devastating effects of radiation poisoning, their lives cut short by a substance that was supposed to bring them health and vitality. One such case was Mary Frances Hill, a 25-year-old woman from Illinois who worked at the USRC factory in Ottawa. In 1929, Hill became ill with severe anemia, which led to her being hospitalized for several months. Despite treatment, she suffered from persistent weak joint pain and hair loss. Tragically, Mary's condition only worsened over the years, and she died in 1946 at the age of 43. The cases of Catherine Donahue and Mary Frances Hill were not isolated incidents. According to official records, over 150 women who worked with radium during this period suffered from severe health problems, including anemia, bone cancer, infertility, and radium. Many of these women would go on to die prematurely, their bodies ravaged by the toxic effects of radium. As news of these tragic cases began to surface, public pressure mounted on the USRC company to take responsibility for the harm caused to its workers. In 1930, a group of investors launched a class action lawsuit against the company, alleging that it had knowingly exposed its employees to radium without proper training or protection. However, the company's attempts to downplay the risks associated with radium continued even as the lawsuits piled up. USRC officials repeatedly stated that radium was safe and that any health problems suffered by workers were due to other factors. It would take years of litigation for the company to eventually acknowledge its liability and begin paying compensation to affected employees. The radium craze also had significant repercussions on the regulatory landscape in the United States. In 1938, Congress passed the Federal Radiation Safety Act, which mandated that companies handling radioactive materials provide their workers with proper training, equipment, and protective measures. This landmark legislation marked a turning point in the government's efforts to regulate industries dealing with hazardous substances. Yet, despite these gains, many questions still remain unanswered about the radium craze. For instance, how did George Bartholf, the USRC founder, know about the dangers of radium, yet continue to downplay them? What memos and documents revealed aware of the substance's toxicity as early as 1925. Additionally, there is still ongoing debate among historians and researchers about the extent of corporate negligence during this period. While it is clear that USRC knew about the risks associated with radium, some have questioned whether other companies in the industry were equally culpable or simply unaware of the dangers. As we reflect on these events, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The radium craze was not just an incident involving a few companies or individuals, but a systematic failure that allowed corporate interests to. This was an era when corporations wielded significant power and influence over government policies and regulatory bodies. Today, as we navigate the complexities of globalization and technological advancement, this story offers us crucial lessons about power, money, trust, government, and our own vulnerability. So, what can we learn from this dark chapter in history? Firstly, it is essential to recognize that corporate interests often prioritize profits over public safety. This was evident during the radium craze, when companies like USRC were willing to sacrifice their workers' health for the sake of growth and profit. One practical lesson we can apply to our lives today is to be vigilant about corporate accountability. As consumers, it's essential to stay informed about the products and services we use and demand transparency from corporations about their manufacturing processes and supply chains. We must also advocate for stronger regulations and enforcement mechanisms that hold companies accountable for any harm caused to workers or the environment. Secondly, the Radium Craze highlights the dangers of blind trust in authority figures and institutions. During this period, many who worked with radium were convinced by their employers that the substance was safe and beneficial. Similarly, today we often rely on government agencies, corporations, and experts to provide us with accurate information about health risks and environmental threats. However, as the Radium Craze showed, even well-intentioned institutions can fail to protect public safety due to corporate pressure or inadequate regulation. Therefore, it is crucial for individuals to take an active role in seeking out multiple sources of information, questioning authority, and holding power holders accountable. Thirdly, this story underscores the importance of critical thinking and media literacy. During the Radium Craze, newspapers and magazines often sensationalized the supposed health benefits of radium while downplaying its risks. Similarly, today we are bombarded with advertisements, social media influencers, and news outlets that may not always provide accurate or unbiased information. By learning to critically evaluate sources and messages, we can become more discerning consumers and citizens who make informed decisions about our lives and the world around us. Lastly, as we navigate the complex landscape of modern life, it's essential to recognize that power is often concentrated in the hands of a few individuals and corporations. The Radium Craze was an era when corporate interests dominated government policies and regulatory bodies. To counterbalance this trend, it's crucial for citizens to engage with politics and activism, demanding greater accountability from those in power. We must also support initiatives that promote transparency, accountability, and democratic participation at the local, national, and international levels. In conclusion, the Radium Craze serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of corporate greed and regulatory failure. As we reflect on this dark chapter in history, it's clear that there are many lessons to be learned about power, money, trust, government, and our own vulnerability. By applying these practical takeaways to our lives today, we can build a more just and equitable society where public safety is prioritized over corporate profits. The Radium Craze may seem like a distant memory, but its legacy continues to shape the world we live in today. As we move forward into an uncertain future, it's essential that we remember the stories of these women who suffered and died due to their exposure to radium, and strive for a better tomorrow by learning from their sacrifices. The Radium Craze may have been fueled by ignorance. It was also driven by a culture of optimism and progress. In the 1920s, Americans were enamored with new technologies and scientific breakthroughs that promised to improve their lives. Radioactivity, in particular, was seen as a revolutionary force that could unlock the secrets of nature and bring about unprecedented benefits. The discovery of radium's health-giving properties sparked widespread excitement, and soon the element became a cultural phenomenon. Madame Curie, the pioneering scientist who first isolated radium, became an international celebrity. Her name was invoked by radium salesmen who touted her endorsement as proof of their product's efficacy. Radium water, which was sold in bottles and marketed as a cure-all for everything from cancer to impotence, was a staple of many pharmacies. People drank it, bathed in it, and even injected it into their veins. The radium industry was largely unregulated, with manufacturers operating under the radar of government agencies. In fact, many companies took advantage of the lack of oversight to make exaggerated claims about their product's benefits. Radium water, for example, was often sold as a treatment for cancer, despite the fact that there was no scientific evidence to support its efficacy. As the radium industry grew, so did the number of people affected by its toxic legacy. Workers in factories and plants handling radium began ill, suffering from radiation poisoning, anemia, and other health problems. Women who had ingested radium-laced water or products experienced a range of symptoms, including headaches, nausea, and fatigue. The government was slow to respond to the crisis, but eventually, investigative journalists and whistleblowers brought attention to the issue. In 1929, a Senate subcommittee held hearings on the dangers of radium, exposing the dark underbelly of the industry. The investigation revealed widespread deceit, greed, and neglect by manufacturers, as well as inadequate regulation and enforcement by government agencies. The radium craze was also marked by tragic personal stories of suffering and loss. One such case is that of Catherine Donahue, a 16-year-old factory worker who began working with radium in 1928. Over the next few years, she ingested small amounts of radium daily, believing it would improve her health. But as the months passed, she became increasingly ill, experiencing terrible pain, swelling, and, eventually, paralysis. Donahue's case was not unique. Many women suffered similar fates, their lives cut short by radiation poisoning. Yet despite these horrific consequences, the industry continued to thrive, fueled by its promise of easy profits and rapid growth. It wasn't until after World War II, when nuclear power plants were built and radioactive waste became a major concern, that the dangers of radium finally began to receive widespread attention. In the aftermath of the radium craze, there was a shift in public perception about science, technology, and regulation. The federal government began to take a more active role in regulating industries deemed hazardous, such as radiation handling and nuclear power plants. Researchers also made significant strides in understanding the effects of radiation on human health. Yet, the legacy of the radium craze continues to be felt today. As we navigate an increasingly complex world, with more advanced technologies and greater exposure to hazardous substances, it's essential that we learn from this dark chapter in history. By acknowledging our vulnerabilities and taking proactive steps towards transparency and accountability, we can build a safer, more equitable society for all. In the next segment of this documentary, we'll explore how the radium craze continues to influence contemporary debates about science, technology, and public health. We'll examine recent examples of similar regulatory failures and discuss what we can learn from these cases in order to prevent further harm to human populations. As we reflect on the radium craze of the 1920s, it's clear that its most enduring lesson is this: the lure of profit and progress can blind us to the true cost of innovation, and only when we prioritize it. But as we move forward into a new era of technological advancements, we must remember that history has a way of repeating itself. In recent years, we've seen eerily similar scenarios unfold in industries like tobacco, pharmaceuticals, and finance, where the pursuit of profit has led to devastating consequences for human health. Take, for example, the case of thalidomide, introduced in the 1950s as a wonder drug for morning sickness and insomnia. Initially touted by manufacturers as a safe and effective solution, it was later revealed that thalidomide caused severe birth defects in thousands of children worldwide. This tragedy prompted widespread outrage and calls for stricter regulation, but similar examples continue to emerge today. As we navigate the complexities of modern life, where cutting-edge technologies and new business models are constantly emerging, it's crucial that we ask ourselves, what lessons can we learn from these cautionary tales? How can we ensure that our pursuit of progress doesn't come at the expense of human lives? If you've made it this far in our story, I urge you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. a colleague, a family member, or friend. For as we confront the darker corners of history, we create opportunities for growth, learning, and positive change. As we bring this chapter to a close, remember that knowledge is power, and by embracing our shared human experiences, we can build a more compassionate and responsible society. If this story opened your eyes, subscribe to Forgotten History Daily. Every week we uncover the stories they don't want you to know. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never stop asking questions. But let's go back in time now, to a moment when America was fascinated by the idea of harnessing the power of radioactivity for health and well-being. It was the 1920s, and the discovery of radium had sparked widespread excitement. The element, which glows with a soft blue light when exposed to air, was being touted as a miracle cure-all, capable of treating everything from cancer to impotence. The most infamous purveyor of radioactive elixirs was a charismatic entrepreneur named Eben Byers. A wealthy and well-connected Byers had made his fortune in the steel industry before turning to the emerging field of radioactivity research. He founded the United States Radium Corporation in 1917 and quickly became one of the leading figures in the new industry. Byers was convinced that radium could cure just about anything. He claimed it could treat arthritis, tuberculosis, and even aging itself. And he had a product to prove it, a radioactive infused water called Radithor. Byers marketed Radithor as a patent medicine, one that would bring unparalleled health benefits to those who drank it. The pitch was irresistible. For just $3 a bottle, consumers could buy themselves a dose of radium in a drinkable form. The salesman peddling Radithor on the streets claimed it was a cure for just about everything, and Byers himself boasted that he had been drinking the stuff for years without any ill effects. But while Byers was raking in the profits, something strange was happening to his customers. They began to get sick, terribly sick. Women complained of hair loss, skin discoloration, and debilitating fatigue. Some even reported experiencing numbness and tingling sensations in their fingers and toes. As it turned out, drinking radioactive water wasn't as harmless as Byers had claimed. Radium was accumulating in the bodies of those who consumed Radithor, causing a condition known as radiation poisoning. The symptoms were gruesome: skin lesions, bone necrosis, and eventual death. The first reports of radium-related illness began to surface around 1925, but it would take several more years for the full extent of the crisis to become clear. By then, hundreds of people had died from drinking Radithor, including Eben Byers himself. The company's records show that he was a heavy user of Radithor. One report claimed he drank up to 150 bottles in just 2 weeks. Byers' death was a grim warning sign, but it took a long time for the medical community and regulatory agencies to take action. Even then, they moved slowly, as if unsure of what to make of this strange new world of radioactive cures. One doctor who did speak out against Radithor was a respected physician from New York. Fry sounded the alarm on radium poisoning in 1927, warning that the substance was not just harmless, but actually toxic. Fry's warnings fell on deaf ears, however. The public remained captivated by the idea of harnessing radioactivity for health and wellness, and Byers' company continued to sell Radithor until it was finally shut down in 1928, after a wave of lawsuits and negative publicity. The radium craze would go down in history as one of the most egregious examples of corporate greed and public gullibility in American history. But its impact was not just financial. It also had profound implications for our understanding of radioactivity and human health. As we explore next, the legacy of Radithor continued to shape medical research and policy for decades to come. It raised uncomfortable questions about accountability, transparency, and the responsibility of corporate leaders towards public health. And it ultimately led to a re-examination of the limits of science and medicine in serving humanity's deepest needs.